to 4K. Now let's have a listen to this range. This is quite a large frequency range, certainly the largest that we have encountered so far. So let's listen to how this sounds.
So I'll keep waiting for you. It's the only thing that I can do to keep my composure. So I'll keep waiting for you. It's the only thing that I can do to keep my composure.
So we've got a ton of the presence, pretty much all of the presence and intelligibility of the vocal is within this range. So pay close attention to how this sits within the mix, how this sounds after you've recorded it. And one thing to bear in mind is, while this is also such an important frequency range in terms of presence and intelligibility, you can also get a lot of harshness, especially between that 2K to 4K, sometimes 1K as well, 1.5K. You might need to work on some build up there, maybe some resonances that you need to attenuate to make sure that it's nice and smooth on the listener's ear. Now let's talk about the upper mids. The upper mids are between 4K-ish, 4.5K to 8 to 9K. So let's listen to how this frequency range sounds.
So I'll keep waiting for you. It's the only thing that I can do to keep my composure. So I'll keep waiting for you. It's the only thing that I can do to keep my composure.
There's a lot of breathiness there. There's a little sizzle there. But there can also be a lot of sibilance. So we need to make decisions based on this frequency range and on the material that we're working with. Do we need to boost that? If boosting that adds more air or accentuates a breathy, airy vocal, or a microphone that has picked up on that, has that detail, do we want to boost that? Or is there a lot of sibilance that is being brought up? And do we need to attenuate that? Those are decisions that you'll need to make based contextually on the singer, on the microphone, on the placement, and all of the groundwork that we've done so far, bringing us to this point in our journey. And finally, let's talk about our highs. That is 10K and above. Let's listen to how this sounds. So we can talk about this as air, as brilliance, as sizzle, as top end presence, whatever you want to call it. That's kind of the associated sound. And also, again, we get a lot of sibilance, particularly with this source material. So it's up to you to decide, do we need to boost it? Do we need to attenuate it? What does the vocal need? What does it need in the context of the mix, in the genre considerations? All of those things you're going to consider while going through each of these frequency ranges. But what I encourage you to do is do something similar here. Pull up 5 or 6 different vocals, maybe download an a cappella from one of your favorite tracks. Have a plugin where you can solo or even just boost and listen to each frequency range. Take note of it, take note of how it sounds, take note of how it's been mixed in the context of that singer and of that song, and really start to study all of this so that you start to associate which frequency ranges have different characteristics, where you want to go within the mix. And, you know, if you're in a certain mix and you think, oh, okay, something's nasal, or I think there's a little too much sibilance, or maybe I want to accentuate some air in this vocal and that would accentuate the emotional tone that we're going for in this particular song. All of this work is the groundwork that allows you to work quickly and instinctually, and over time you will just have all of this under your belt and be able to just go wherever you need to go to express the emotion and help to pave the way for the journey that the song needs to go in, free from distraction, easy for the listener to follow along with, so everything is nice and smooth. There's nothing that jumps out too aggressively or is unpleasant for the listener. And with time and practice, you will get better at this, and you won't need to necessarily think about this. You'll be able to just go where you need to go and get the job done. EQ filters and their applications. What are EQ filters? EQ filters are tools used to adjust the frequency response of an audio signal. EQ filters allow you to boost or cut specific frequency ranges, shaping the tonal balance of a sound. How do they work? EQ filters work by selectively altering the amplitude of specific frequency ranges within an audio signal, allowing producers to shape the tonal balance, remove unwanted frequencies, or emphasize certain aspects of the sound. Here are different types of EQ filters and their applications. Low-pass filter. A low-pass filter allows frequencies below a set cutoff point to pass through while attenuating frequencies above that point. This is useful for removing unwanted high-frequency content such as hiss or sibilance, and for creating a warmer, more subdued sound. High-pass filter. A high-pass filter allows frequencies above a set cutoff point to pass through while attenuating frequencies below that point. This is useful for removing low-frequency rumble, mic handling noise, or room noise from vocal recordings without affecting the clarity of the higher frequencies. Bandpass filter. A bandpass filter allows a specific range of frequencies to pass through while attenuating frequencies outside that range. This is useful for isolating a particular frequency range in vocals or instruments and for creative sound design applications. Notch filter. A notch filter attenuates a narrow band of frequencies around a specific center frequency. This is useful for removing unwanted resonances, feedback, or specific problem frequencies in vocals or instruments. Bell curve. A bell curve boosts or cuts frequencies around a specific center frequency with a specific bandwidth, or Q. This is useful for surgical EQ adjustments to enhance or attenuate specific frequencies in vocals, instruments, or an overall mix. Shelving EQ. Shelving EQ boosts or cuts all frequencies above or below a set cutoff point. This is useful for broad tonal shaping such as adding warmth by boosting low frequencies or adding airiness by boosting high frequencies in vocals or instruments. Tilt EQ. Tilt EQ tilts the frequency response of the audio signal, boosting or cutting both low and high frequencies simultaneously while maintaining a balanced overall sound. This is useful for adjusting the overall tonal balance of vocals or instruments without affecting the mid-range. Each type of EQ filter has its own unique characteristics and applications, and understanding how to use them effectively can help you achieve the desired sound in your vocal productions. Alright, so in this video I want to demonstrate all of the different filter types that we've spoken about so far so that you get a sense for how these sound and their practical applications and what they look like on an EQ. So first off, let's start with our high pass filter. So we are allowing all of the highs to pass from the specific frequency range that we dictate. So right now, from 100 Hertz and above, we're allowing all the highs to pass. So let's have a listen to how this sounds on a vocal.
I want you and only you. I got nothing left to lose. Oh, so I'll keep waiting for you. It's the only thing that I can do to keep my composure. I need you closer. I want you and only you.
So what you might notice that it's very subtle when sweeping between this range, so 100 Hertz and below, and then when we
You and only you.
start going towards 150 to 200 Hertz, we start to lose a little bit of the body of the vocal. So let's have a listen to that.
I want you and only you. I want you. I want you and only you.
On.
I want you and only you. I want you and only you.
So we miss some of the body of that vocal. So I would want to dial that back for sure.
I want you and only you. I want you and only you. I want you and only you.
What's so interesting as well is even just filtering and allowing the highs to pass from 70 hertz, what happens is this very strange phenomenon where the brightness of the vocal seems to boost when you get rid of this frequency range here. And you're really just getting rid of gunk, as I like to call it. Let's listen to what we're getting rid of. Nothing really that we're going to miss. So this is a really, really powerful technique, as simple as it is. All right, let's move on to the low pass filter. So this is the opposite. So we're telling the EQ to allow all the lows to pass depending on where we are. So from which frequency range we dictate.
I want you and only you. I got nothing left to lose. So I'll keep waiting for you. I can do to keep my composure. Oh, I need you closer.
So that sounds like someone is singing in the other room.
I want you and only you.
So that's a creative application we can have if we wanted to have vocals or an instrument sound like it's in another room. We would know what to do now.
I want you and only you.
So what it allows us to think about is placing something further away in terms of how the listener's perceiving it. So that's a really great vocal production tool and production tool in general. We want to just think about it as
I want you and only
further away and darker, duller, warmer. All right, let's move on to a band pass filter. So this is our band, and only the frequencies within this band can pass through. So let's have a sweep through and listen to how this sounds.
I want you and only you. I got nothing left to lose. So I'll keep waiting for you. It's the only thing that I can do to keep my composure. Oh, I need you closer.
And we can make this narrower, like this.
I want you and only you. I got nothing left to lose. So I'll keep waiting for you. It's the only thing that I can do to keep my composure. Oh, I need you closer. I want you and only you.
So if you want the kind of telephone effect, you can create that with a bandpass filter, and then you can just isolate that.
I want you and only you. I got nothing left to lose. So I'll keep waiting for you. I want you and only you.
On,
I want you and only you.
off.
I want you and only you.
So you can really just sculpt the tone of any vocal or any other instrument and use a bandpass filter to limit the range of frequencies to exactly where you want it to sit. Let's move on to a notch filter. So let's say there is a resonance that we want to get rid of. Let's have a listen to the vocal.
I want you and only you. I got nothing left to lose. So I'll keep waiting for you. It's the only thing that I can do to keep my composure. I need you closer.
This is going to be an extreme case. Let's get rid of the extreme sizzle going on here with a notch filter. And then we can play around with the Q to be as narrow as we want it to be or as wide as we want it to be. Generally, with notch filters and with bell curves, which we'll cover in a second, the higher up in the frequency range, the more narrow you want it to be, so it sounds more transparent, whereas the lower you can be a little wider and broader.
I want you and only you. I want you and only you. I want you and only you.
So what we have going on here, it's very subtle,
I want you and only you.
but there's a big build-up of this high-end energy, this airy crispiness that is being attenuated here.
I want you and only you.
Let's solo it.
I want you and only you. I want you and only you.
We lose a little bit of presence as well, but this would all be highly contextual. Within the mix, how it sounded would dictate the choices that I'd want to make in terms of how I would sculpt the tone of this vocal. All right, let's move on to a bell. This is a bell curve, so you can boost.
I want you and only you. I want you and only you. I want you and only you.
And you can cut.
I want you and only you. I want you and only you. I want you and only you.
And then you can play around with the Q for really tight, narrow cues and really broad brush strokes. So you want to think about surgical moves like this to be something very, very detailed and direct, whereas broader is going to be something where we are working with big, broad brush strokes. So if you wanted to get rid of a general frequency range where there might be some build up, you would want to be a little more broad and heavy-handed. If you had some real problem areas that you wanted to dial in, maybe a high-end hum, hiss, or something like that, you would maybe use something like this or a notch filter, and then you can use the solo function to find that and then get rid of it. And then we have a shelf. So a shelf looks like a shelf. So you can boost and you can cut. So you have a high shelf. So from 3 kilohertz upwards, we're boosting that frequency range, everything from 3K and above, or we can cut everything from 3K-ish and above.
I want you and only you. I want you and only you.
This is something that I hear a lot in less experienced vocal mixes. There's just a ton of this, and save your ears here. This is going to be pretty unpleasant.
I want you and only you. I got nothing left to lose.
Just crazy, crazy boosting in the high, mids, and highs. And it can be really crispy and sizzly and unpleasant to the ears and distracting. It brings up all of this sibilance. Let's listen to it the other way.
I want you and only you. I got nothing left to lose. Oh, so I'll keep waiting for you. It's the only thing that I can do to keep my composure.
So that would have been a little nasty on your ears. A lot of that mid-range energy, that build-up, created distortion. And that's just from boosting all of this energy up. And then we have a low shelf. So it's just the opposite. So we can boost the lows.
And only you. I got nothing left to lose. Oh, so I'll keep waiting for you. It's the only thing that I can do to keep my composure. Oh, I need you closer. I want you and only you.
So just pay attention to how all of that sounds, and depending on the mix, depending on the production, depending on the emotional tone you want to go for, you would use all of these different filters and the placement within the frequency spectrum to shape and sculpt the tone that you want in the context of kind of what you're going for, in terms of the reference, in terms of everything we've mentioned so far. So finally, let's talk about a tilt shelf so that you can see what that looks like. This is a tilt shelf. So as you can see, I can tilt all around the frequency spectrum, and it's boosting while attenuating the opposite end of the frequency spectrum. So let's have a listen to how this sounds.
I want you and only you. I got nothing left to lose. Oh, so I'll keep waiting for you. It's the only thing that I can do to keep my composure. Oh, I need you closer. I want you and only you.
So that is a tilt shelf. In all honesty, a tilt shelf isn't something that I've really ever used in any applications of my own productions or mixes, but go ahead and experiment with it. It definitely has its applications, but I wanted to demonstrate that and highlight that to cover all grounds in terms of all the filter types, so that you have all the knowledge that you need to understand EQ moving forward when mixing and producing your own vocals. So play around with all of these filters, experiment with how you hear all of the different filters and the Q and the slopes as well. You can also play around with stereo placement, but that is a lot more advanced. The most important thing here is to train your ears, and this comes with a lot of time, a lot of practice, and really starting to associate the different frequency ranges and their characteristics. And when you have that under your belt, you will be able to hear a lot of these nuances. You'll be able to spot resonances, spot build up, and spot pleasant frequencies that you think would benefit from being boosted. And if I were to share any tip here, I would say be aggressive. And this might go against a lot of what you hear on YouTube or any other courses, but for you to really hear things, be aggressive and, really push it. Push these things to hear what's happening, to really understand the tools. And over time, as you start to understand and hear all of this stuff, you'll be able to really dial into things when they're really subtle as well. And finally, my other tip that really helped me when it came to mixing vocals specifically is, rather than this kind of sweep, search and destroy method, I like to just listen with the solo function and sweep from Unity. So I'm just at 0. I'm not boosting anything, because in all honesty, boosting something by 10 or 15 dB and sweeping, kind of everything sounds horrible. So you're just going to end up with kind of all of this crazy stuff that you sometimes see where, people are just cutting everything and completely butchering the vocal. So what I recommend is to just start with the solo function, and you don't need FabFilter to do this. A lot of EQs have this function. There are free EQs that have a solo function. So just have a look at that and type that in and see if you don't have one already. Just download one, trial some, see which ones feel good. And this is kind of how I make my decisions, not too narrow. And then just sort of listening.
It's the only thing that I can do to keep my composure. Oh, I need you close. I want you and only you.
And I would make decisions based on that as opposed to boosting things. And we will move on to these techniques that I'm using now later on. Popular EQ models in vocal production. Here are some of the most popular EQ models used in vocal production and mixing. Pultec EQP-1A. The Pultec EQP-1A is a classic tube EQ known for its smooth and musical sound. It's often used in vocal production to add warmth, presence, and air to vocal recordings. The EQP-1A features unique low and high boost cut shelves, as well as a mid-range EQ section with selectable frequencies. FabFilter Pro Q. FabFilter Pro Q is a versatile digital EQ plugin known for its intuitive interface and transparent sound. It offers precise control over frequency bands with features like dynamic EQ, linear phase mode, and per band mid-side processing. In vocal production, Pro Q is used for detailed tonal shaping, surgical corrections, and dynamic EQ tasks. SSL E-Series Channel Strip. This plugin emulates the EQ section of the classic SSL 4000 E-Series console, known for its punchy and aggressive sound. The SSL EQ is favored in vocal production for its ability to add clarity, presence, and energy to vocals. It features a 4-band EQ with adjustable frequency ranges and switchable bell/shelf curves. Maag Audio EQ4. The Maag EQ4 is renowned for its airband, a unique high-frequency shelf that adds sparkle and presence to vocals. It also features a fixed low-frequency shelf and 2 parametric bands for more precise tonal shaping. The Maag EQ4 is popular in vocal production for its ability to enhance clarity and airiness without sounding harsh or brittle. These are just a few examples of popular EQ models used in vocal production. Each EQ has its own sonic characteristics, features, and workflow, so it's essential to experiment and find the ones that best suit your preferences and the requirements of the vocal track you're working on. There are also a ton of stock and free emulations, so don't feel you need to spend money on buying these plugins. So I wanted to demonstrate some of the popular EQ models that you will come across that are used in a lot of different genres and by a lot of people in the industry. So here are a few that I'm going to cover. So we've got the Pultec, we've got FabFilter Pro Q, and we've got the SSL E channel, which is just this part. So I'm going to just walk you through all of the parameters, how to use these EQs, and the applications for vocal production and vocal mixing. So the Pultec EQ is a passive EQ, and this is used widely because of the broad musical frequency filters that have been built into this analog unit. So this is an analog emulation of a classic piece of hardware. So let's walk through how to use this. We've got our on-off, then we have our low frequency, so we can only pick between 20, 30, 60, and 100 hertz, and then we can boost that like that, and then we can attenuate like that. So if you wanted to remove some of that, you can do it like so, you can boost it like that, and you can also boost and attenuate, which is a really nice function here. So what you're essentially doing is boosting 60 hertz and then attenuating the less desirable parts within that frequency range. So let's move on to the second part of this. So we have boost, attenuate, just like that, and then we have more frequencies to choose from. So high frequency, 3K, 4K, 5K, 8K, 10K, 12K, and 16K. And then we have an attenuation here as well, which is 5K, 10K, and 20K. So you can boost and attenuate. Let's say that you wanted to boost 8K and attenuate 5K. You attenuate like so. And then you have the trim here. So if you needed to turn the level down, you're getting some excessive gain from any boosts or any attenuation, and you wanted to bring that up. And then finally we have bandwidth. So we have sharp or broad. So this is the Q. So how sharp you want the Q to be with the high frequencies, or how broad you want them to be. So if you wanted a broad boost, you wanted something that is a lot more broad brush strokes, you can push it all the way here. You can go somewhere in the middle, or you can go narrow. So let's have a listen to this briefly. So I'm going to boost each of these frequency ranges. I'm going to be really aggressive so we can try and hear what this is doing.
I want you and only you. 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 I want you and only you.
So 20 hertz is really subtle. You can really start to hear it at 30, 60 and 100. 60 and 100 is a lot easier to hear. And let's attenuate and have a listen to how that sounds.
I want you and only you. I want you and only you. I want you and only you. I want you and only you.
So it's slightly more scooped. We're still getting that boost, but it's getting rid of some of the less desirable parts of boosting within that frequency range, which can be super helpful. Let's move on to the high frequencies. So we've got 3K.
I want you and only you.
Let me bring the gain down a bit.
I want you and only you. 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 I want you and only you.
So we're getting some of the high mids and then we're moving into the highs. Let's attenuate.
I want you and only you. 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 I want you and only you.
So we're having a similar effect. It's more scooped. We're getting rid of some of the harshness when we attenuate. So you can dial that into taste. So let's listen to 10K with the bandwidth sharp.
I want you and only you.
And broad.
I want you and only you.
A lot more subtle, a lot more pleasing, a lot more musical are the kind of terms that I would describe. It's very, very sharpened.
I want you and only you.
Sizzling, and there is a lot of high end in this recording, and this is a processed vocal sample. So it would sound very, very different on a raw vocal recording, but what we're doing here is accentuating all of the different parts within this already processed vocal recording. Let's listen to 4K.
I want you and only you. I want you and only you.
A lot more easy to listen to, a lot cleaner, whereas this sounds like we're bringing up the artificial digital brightness that we might not want.
I want you and only you. I want you and only you.
5K.
I want you and only you. I want you and only you.
3K.
I want you and only you. I want you and only you.
And we're boosting this by 10 dB. Now let's just bypass that and listen to what's happening.
I want you and only you. I want you and only you. I want you and only you. I want you and only you.
So we're getting some gain as well. So let's try and match that.
I want you and only you. I want you and only you. I want you and only you. I want you and only you.
So there's some major tonal shifts that are happening here. But when we play around with the broad bandwidth, it's a lot more imperceptible. So that can be good if you want more subtle shifts playing around with the boost. But it can also be a curse, because what might happen is if you're not bypassing and listening to the original signal, you can start to make some very drastic changes that, in the context of the mix and the direction you're going in with the vocal production, may end up being detrimental. So just bear that in mind when you're working with this EQ. It's a beautiful EQ. I really love working with this, and it's something that I use a lot on my vocals. I love how easy it is to use and the limitation, and really just forcing you to listen as opposed to look at, and to make decisions based off of that. This knob is really amazing to play around with, to make things sound a little more broad and subtly sweeten your vocals. All right, let's move on to FabFilter. So we have already done some demonstrations with this. We have got our filter types that we covered earlier on, and then we've got our slopes, and then our Q. So let's have a bell. We can make it broad, narrow. So it's the same thing as the bandwidth. As we're making it sharp, it's sharp like this. And then as we're making it broad, so if you need a visual aid, that's kind of what's happening under the hood. So Pro Q is great for a utility plugin where you're just, bringing things, filtering things out, attenuating some frequencies, some build up. If you maybe can hear that something is, around a certain frequency range, but you need to really get in there to find that specific frequency and then, bring it down, etc. This is a really great plugin for that. Of course, you've got your stock plugin, which looks very similar. It has a little more limited functionality, but this is a perfect plugin. It does all the same things apart from some more advanced features, but to just play around with the filter types, boost, cut, you can do very narrow cuts. And I was laughing with Jake just now because I was talking to him about the different EQ models and which ones I should cover. And he was like, dude, I only use the stock Logic EQ ever. And his stuff is totally pro. So you do not need to have all these different EQs. I personally like to play around with different models. I know that Dane and Caleb like to do that too. It's all just down to each person's individual preference, their workflow, and what they need the EQs for. So, we can add our shelves. We've got our high pass, got our low pass, play around with the slopes, brick wall. You probably never want to do that unless it was a really creative effect vocally in the context of mixing and producing vocals. What I really love Pro Q for is the dynamic EQ. I use that a lot to tame resonances and harshness in vocals. So of course this vocal is a sample that I've pulled in for this demonstration purpose, and it's all been processed and it's already really well produced and recorded. But let's just have a sweep through and I'll show you an example of how I would find potentially harsh parts of a vocal or some resonances and kind of tame those.
I want you and only you. 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 I want you and only you.
Let's bypass this and have a listen to what we've done.
I want you and only you. I want you and only you. I want you and only you.
So we're losing a little bit of this.
I want you.
So let me make it dynamic.
I want you and only you.
Don't worry about this. We're going to cover this in detail later.
I want you and only you. I want you and only you.
Very subtle moves.
I want you and only you. I want you and only you. I want you and only you.
I like the body of this, but I just want to make it dynamic just in case there's a build up around there.
I want you and only you. I want you and only you. I want you and only. I want you and only you. I want you and only you.
So we're losing some of the body of that. I would maybe turn that off.
I want you and only you.
But what I'm hearing is it's a lot smoother. It feels a lot less upfront in solo, but we need to listen to it in the context of the mix and then make those decisions as well. So I wouldn't typically do this in solo. I might do it if I'm just trying to find, a specific frequency range or, maybe a problem frequency in solo. Or what I often do is, the music is playing, the mix is playing, and then I would just bring the vocals up so they poke out of the mix so I can hear it a little more, but I'm still hearing it in context with the music, and then I tuck it back in. But here's an example of some stuff that you could do. I probably wouldn't go this far. This is some of the applications that I use Pro Q for. So let's talk about the SSL E series channel strip. So when I am talking about the E series channel strip, I'm talking about this section here. So there are a lot of plugins that are just this section. So this is modeled from the SSL 4K bus processor. So we have a lot more going on here. We've got a compressor here. We've got trim. We've got width. We've got pan. We've got other parameters that we don't need to worry about here. So I'm going to turn those off. We've just got our EQ. And we've got our in, our on off. And then we have low frequencies at the bottom. And we have a lot more flexibility here. So as opposed to the Pultec, which has fixed frequencies, we can really dial in where we want to go here. And then we boost and attenuate like so. And you can make it a bell as opposed to a shelf. And then we've got the low mids. And we've got our Q here, narrow and broad. And then we've got our high mids, narrow and broad Q, boost and attenuate. And then choose the frequency range. The same for high frequencies. And then we can boost. This is a shelf and this is a shelf. And you can remember that with this, which kind of looks like a shelf as well. And if you want it to be a bell, you can just click bell. And then we have our low pass filter and high pass. So let's say we wanted to allow the lows to pass up to 4K, we could do so. Or we could do our high pass up to 100. And you can do that all in here, which is amazing. This gives you so much flexibility, and it also has its own characteristics in terms of how the filters are shaped and the way that they have been programmed in this analog unit. So let's play around a little bit with each of these parameters. So we've got a low pass.
I want you and only you.
Our high pass.
I want you and only you. I want you and only you.
Let's move this over just to give you a different section so you don't go crazy.
I got nothing left to lose. 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 I got nothing left to lose.
That's with a bell. Let's do it as a shelf.
I got nothing left to lose. 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 I got nothing left to lose.
Let's attenuate it.
I got nothing left to lose. 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 I got nothing.
And listen again to, similarly to the narrow and broad in the Pultec.
I got nothing left to lose. I got nothing left to lose.
So let's boost 8K.
I got nothing left to lose.
And then let's put it to a shelf.
I got nothing left to lose. I got nothing left to lose. I got nothing left to lose.
A lot more subtle, a lot easier on the ears. So make the decision what you need in that moment, what the vocal needs, what it needs in the context of the mix. But that's something I want to highlight here. And then we've got our high mids.
I got nothing left to lose. I got nothing left to lose. I got nothing left to lose. I got nothing left to lose.
So I'm hearing,
I got nothing left to lose.
I could just take some of that
I
out.
got nothing left to lose. I 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 got nothing left to lose.
I much prefer that personally from a taste standpoint, getting rid of a little bit of that 800. We've got a narrow Q, just attenuating that, about just under -2. That's something you could do. And you can sweep through like so.
I got nothing left to lose. I got nothing left.
Make it broad.
I got nothing left to lose. I got nothing left to lose.
Or narrow, and etc. You know, you can go around and play around with this to taste. You can reference and listen to songs that had vocals mixed using the SSL. There'll be so many. And you can kind of listen to what's happening there, try and emulate it, try and recreate the tonal balance of it, and really play around with each of these parameters. What I love about this EQ, not only in the way that it boosts and attenuates the frequencies, is that it also, like the Pultec, allows you to really dial in to what you're hearing. It forces you to start to trust your ears, which I think is really important, as opposed to the trap here where you can start to see things peaking all over the place, which are natural. Resonances are natural. Build up is natural in the human voice and in human recording. And then you start to just do this, which in itself can be quite aggressive and quite overkill. And, you know, sometimes you get too aggressive and you just lose all of the life of the vocal. Let's listen to how that would sound.
I got nothing left to lose. I got nothing left to lose. I got nothing left to lose.
It's just sucked all of the life and energy out of it. So you don't want to just rely on your eyes here and be mixing with your eyes. You want to really listen to what you're doing and also take breaks. Bypass is your best friend. Listen to whether what you've done is helping or hurting the mix. Never be afraid to just start again, get rid of it all, and then reassess. So those are a couple of my favorite EQ models. Play around with these. The Pultec EQ has its own stock version in Logic. There we are, our Tube EQ. This is modeled on a slightly different version of the Pultec, which has more frequencies. But this is essentially the same. You can see that this top half looks very similar. We've got our attenuation, we've got our output, we've got our drive, our on-off / in-out, our low boost. And this actually gives you more flexibility. So it doesn't just snap like the original Pultec does, where you can only pick that. So you have a higher degree of flexibility here, which is also great. And there are SSL emulations that are not actually by Solid State Logic SSL. This version is the faithful emulation from SSL themselves. There's also a UAD version, and there are Slate Digital versions, and you can look up. There's some cheap or free alternatives for sure. The biggest thing I want to emphasize here is please don't feel like you need to go and spend money on any of these plugins, even ProQ. You know, all of these have a different degree of flexibility and they're just different paints on your palette. And with time, you get to associate what each of these sounds like and what the applications are in different context, and you just pull these out when needed. And when starting out, this is more than good enough. You don't need to get bogged down with thinking that buying more tools is going to make you better as a producer and engineer. The truth is, the right ear training and having a dialed in room and having a firm understanding of how the tools work and any mindset shifts that are holding you back or leading you astray, identifying those and eradicating them, that is the true way that you will get better in all of the avenues of music production. So please, 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 if you take anything away from this section, let this be your message. Please just use what you have until your skill level and where you're at allows you to afford better tools. You don't need to start buying things in the hope that that is going to be your saving grace and make you better. What makes you better is doing the work, mixing vocals, producing vocals, and learning the tools. So I hope this walkthrough was helpful. Let's move on. Dynamic EQ. What is dynamic EQ? Dynamic EQ is a type of equalization that combines the principles of traditional EQ with dynamic processing techniques, such as compression and expansion. Unlike static EQ, which applies fixed adjustments to all frequencies, dynamic EQ responds to changes in the audio signal's volume and selectively applies EQ adjustments only when certain thresholds are exceeded. Here's how it works. First off, you have your threshold. Like a compressor, dynamic EQ has a threshold setting. When the audio signal crosses this threshold, the dynamic EQ starts to apply EQ adjustments. Frequency bands. Dynamic EQ typically operates across multiple frequency bands, allowing you to target specific areas of the audio spectrum. Gain reduction. When the audio exceeds the threshold, dynamic EQ reduces or boosts the gain of selected frequencies, depending on the configured settings. This reduction or boost is applied dynamically based on the amplitude or volume of the audio signal. Dynamic EQ is useful for scenarios where traditional EQ may not be sufficient. For example, it can help control harshness in vocals or tame resonant frequencies in instruments without affecting the overall tonal balance when the problem frequencies are not present. It's a versatile tool for precision shaping of audio signals, especially in dynamic and complex mix environments. Dynamic EQ is highly relevant to vocal production because it offers a nuanced approach to addressing specific issues that may arise during vocal mixing. Here are a few ways that dynamic EQ can be applied. De-essing. Dynamic EQ can be used to target and reduce sibilant frequencies in vocal recordings. Instead of applying static de-essing across the entire vocal track, dynamic EQ only activates when sibilance occurs, providing a more natural and transparent solution. Taming resonances. Vocal recordings may have resonant frequencies that cause certain notes or syllables to sound harsh or boomy. Dynamic EQ can dynamically attenuate these resonances, ensuring a smoother and more even vocal performance without affecting unaffected frequencies. Controlling dynamics. Sometimes vocal performances have inconsistent dynamics, with certain phrases or syllables standing out too much. Dynamic EQ can help tame these fluctuations by applying EQ adjustments only when the volume exceeds a certain threshold, helping to maintain a more consistent vocal level throughout the track. Masking prevention. In a dense mix, vocals can get masked by other instruments or frequencies, affecting clarity. Dynamic EQ can help by automatically adjusting the vocal frequencies in real time to ensure they remain audible and prominent, even in busy arrangements. Overall, dynamic EQ provides a flexible and precise tool for addressing specific issues in vocal recordings while maintaining the naturalness and transparency of the original performance. It's an invaluable asset in the vocal producer's toolkit for achieving polished and professional vocal mixes. So let's walk through dynamic EQ. I want to walk you through what this looks like in the real application of how you can use this on vocals. So dynamic EQ is exactly what it sounds like. As we've mentioned, you are taking certain frequencies or frequency ranges, and then you are having them reacting to the frequencies dynamically. So to do this in Pro Q, you click on Make Dynamic, and then you see this, as opposed to this, which just looks like a normal bell. So let's enable the dynamics. Let's go down to the low mids.
Only thing that I can do to keep my composure, so I'll keep waiting.
So this is an example where I would use dynamic EQ. There is this build up here around 220, which is not throughout the whole duration of this vocal take. It just comes in at certain moments when the singer hits certain vowels and there's build up in that frequency range. So I would just want to put a dynamic EQ around there just to attenuate it when it goes over a certain threshold. So in order for me to dial that in, I will mess around with the Q to see how broad or narrow I want it to be. And then I bring the gain down.
I want you and only you. I got nothing left to lose.
And then you can see this here, the dynamic range. And then as I bring this down, this is going to attenuate this more aggressively and less aggressively and bring the range down.
I want you and only you. I got nothing left to lose. Oh, so I'll keep waiting for you.
So you can see when those notes are being hit in that frequency range, it's starting to bring that dynamic range down and make sure that it doesn't go over that threshold.
I want you and
So when we use dynamic EQ, this is when we want to have more control over frequencies and frequency ranges and resonances that only happen once every so often or once during the performance of the vocals. And we want to make sure that when those build up at those parts, we attenuate them. And the reason we use dynamic EQ is it can be a lot more transparent. So rather than just carving that frequency and frequency range out of the vocal completely, which would sound like this.
I want you and only you. I got nothing left to lose.
Let's have a listen to it with the dynamics in place.
I want you and only you. I got nothing left to lose. Oh.
We retain a little bit more of the body of that vocal and just make sure that it doesn't sound too boomy in the parts where it is too boomy. So it sounds a lot more natural, it sounds a little more transparent, and it's also retaining the natural goodies that we have in that vocal recording. So when you have that intention, that is when you would want to go ahead and pull up a dynamic EQ. EQ key takeaways. When using EQ on vocals, there are several important takeaways to focus on. Number one is to listen critically. Always listen to the vocals in the context of the mix and make adjustments based on what sounds best rather than relying solely on visual representations or presets. Start with subtractive EQ. Begin by identifying and cutting any problematic frequencies or unwanted resonances before boosting. This helps to clean up the vocal sound and create space for other elements in the mix. Avoid excessive boosting. While it's tempting to boost frequencies to make vocals stand out, excessive EQ can lead to unnatural or harsh sounding results. Aim for subtle adjustments and use multiple EQ bands if necessary to achieve the desired tonal balance. Consider dynamic EQ. In addition to traditional static EQ, dynamic EQ can be useful for addressing dynamic or transient issues in vocal recordings, such as sibilance or resonant peaks. Use high-pass filtering. Apply a high-pass filter to roll off low frequencies below the vocal's fundamental range to remove rumble and unnecessary low-end energy, helping to clean up the mix and improve clarity. Experiment and trust your ears. Every vocal recording is unique, so don't be afraid to experiment with different EQ settings and techniques to find the best sound for your particular track. Ultimately, trust your ears and make adjustments based on what sounds best in the context of the mix, the anchoring of your references, and your taste. Always ask why. Before making any move, know the reason behind it. It's important to know why you're using EQ and if you even need to. If you're not sure, take a step back, pull up a reference, and let yourself be anchored in objectivity. There's a lot more to cover when mastering EQ, and we have a comprehensive course just covering everything you need to know. So if you feel like you still need further guidance, you can go ahead and check that out later. So after covering everything that we've gone through so far in terms of EQ, the types of EQ, model, frequency ranges, all of that good stuff, I want to walk you through EQing a section of a vocal just to demonstrate everything that we've gone through so far. So you can follow along and see the methodology, the techniques, the thought processes behind what I'm doing and the tools that I'm using as well. So first off, let's have a listen to what we've got.
On the edge, won't the world stop turning? fast, but I can't help falling. Feel we're on the verge of it, free falling on the precipice. Stand staring at the edge, without a care, we're on the brink. Gotta taste it, so sweet, sipping in your ecstasy. Yes.
Okay, so first of all, I'm hearing some sibilants, and especially on sipping. So we're going to want a DS, which we will go over later, but we can use some dynamic EQ to mitigate that, to attenuate some of that. The vocal is a little tucked back, but I know that I can bring presence by boosting certain frequency ranges, the upper mid range, the highs to add a bit more air and brilliance to it. And there's also some build up in the low mids that I want to attenuate as well. And I just want to bring this to a more polished, bright, and present sounding vocal. I want to make sure that the intelligibility is there as well. And of course, the dynamic processing will help with that, compression, gain automation, etc. But for this demonstration, I just want to focus on EQ. So let's pull up Pro Q and let's get to work.
On the edge, won't the world stop turning? Thinking fast, but I can't help falling. Feel we're on the verge of it, free falling on this. Stand staring at the edge, without a care, we're on the brink. Gotta taste it, so sweet, sipping in your ecstasy. Yes. On the edge, won't the world stop turning? Thinking fast, but I can't help falling.
Okay, let's. Okay, around 6K. We might have to attenuate that 9K as well.
On the edge, won't the world stop turning? Thinking fast, but I
Okay, just a little bit.
on the edge, turning, thinking fast, but I can't help falling. Feel we're on the verge of it, free falling on the precipice. Stand staring at. Thinking fast, but I can't help falling. Feel we're on the verge of it, free falling on the precipice. Stand staring at the edge, without a care, we're on the brink. Gotta taste ecstasy. Yes. On the edge, won't the world stop turning? Thinking fast, but I can't help falling. Feel we're on the verge of it.
So I've just clicked the auto gain feature on here, and I'm just making sure that Pro Q is gain matching so that I'm not making decisions based on things sounding louder or quieter, because I've cut a lot of frequencies and frequency ranges and boosted some as well. So I want to make sure that the work I'm doing is shaping the tone, and I'm not fooling myself by thinking things are louder or quieter.
On the edge, won't the world stop turning? Thinking fast, but I can't help falling. Feel we're on the verge of it, free falling on the precipice.
Now I'm using dynamic EQ here to tame some of that sibilance. In all honesty, this isn't how I would go about it. I would actually just pull up a de-esser and use that. But this is a great example of how you can use it as well. I find it can be a little bit pernickety and fiddly, which isn't great in terms of my workflow. I like to work quickly and, use the objectivity that I have on fresh ears, as opposed to moving around and going in circles and adding more and more stuff that I don't need to. So this is sounding pretty good. Let's A/B. Before.
On the edge, won't the world stop turning?
Okay. I just want to get a little more air gain.
On the edge, won't the world stop turning? Thinking fast, but I can't help falling. Feel we're on the verge of it, free falling on the precipice. Stand staring at the edge, without a care, we're on the brink. Gotta taste it, so sweet. Sipping in your ecstasy. Yes. On the edge, won't the world stop turning? Thinking fast, but I can't help falling. Feel we're on the verge of it, free falling on the precipice. Stand staring at the edge, without a care, we're on the brink. Gotta taste it, so sweet. Sipping in your ecstasy. On the edge, won't the world stop turning? Thinking fast, but I can't help falling. Feel we're on the verge of it, free falling on the precipice.
Okay, I like this 650 here. It's bringing a little bit more presence and weight to the vocal and a little bit of air, which I like. I'm still getting the sibilance. Let me de-ess it and see whether this helps.
On the edge, won't the world stop turning? Thinking fast, but I can't help falling. Feel we're on the verge of it, free falling on the precipice. Stand staring at the edge, without a care, we're on the brink. Gotta taste it, so sweet. Sipping in your ecstasy. Yes.
Lovely. So it got that sipping, which was the worst one. And what this actually allows me to do, this is quite aggressive de-essing. And we'll cover this later, go over all the parameters. I'll do a whole demo just on de-essing. But this is essentially a dynamic EQ. So you're telling it the frequency range, you're putting the threshold down, the range by how many decibels do you want it to be pulled down, and then you're just dialing that into taste. What this has allowed me to do is I can actually push some of that air more now, which is kind of what I wanted to go for, especially the references that we're using. This is an alt pop song, so we're looking at artists like Holly Humberston who have pretty bright, airy vocals.
On the edge, won't the world stop turning? Thinking fast, but I can't help falling. Feel we're on the verge of it, free falling on the precipice. Stand staring at the edge, without a care, we're on the brink. Gotta taste it, so sweet. Sipping in your ecstasy. Yes.
Okay, let's just double check that this Maag EQ is gain matched.
On the edge, won't the world stop turning? Thinking fast, but I can't help falling. Feel we're on the verge of it, free falling on the precipice.
That seems pretty good to me. Maybe just a tad. So this is some basic EQing on here now. Let's A/B it and see where we're at. Before.
On the edge, won't the world stop turning? Thinking fast, but I can't help falling. Feel we're on the verge of it, free falling on the precipice. Stand staring at the edge, without a care, we're on the brink. Gotta taste it, so sweet. Sipping in your ecstasy. Yes.
Okay, and now let's add the EQ moves and the de-esser that we've put in.
On the edge, won't the world stop turning? Thinking fast, but I can't help falling. Feel we're on the verge of it, free falling on the precipice. Stand staring at the edge, without a care, we're on the brink. Gotta taste it, so sweet. Sipping in your ecstasy. Yes.
Okay, so we've still got some of that sibilance, and what I would probably go ahead and do is bring some of that down.
On the edge, won't the world stop turning? Thinking fast, but I can't help falling. stop turning. Thinking fast, but I
Okay.
fast, but I can't. Thinking fast, but I can't. Thinking fast, but I can't help falling. Feel we're on the verge of it, free falling on the precipice. Stand staring. Stand staring. Stand staring at the edge. Without a care, we're on the brink. Gotta taste it, so sweet. So
You could go ahead and clip gain it as well.
taste it, so
Okay, that's too aggressive. Let's get in here.
taste it, so sweet. Sipping it,
Okay.
sip it, sip it.
Okay. Just clip gain that down. So these are whichever way you prefer.
Sipping it, sipping in your ecstasy. Yes.
Okay. It's feeling a little better.
Break out, break. Free falling on the precipice. Stand staring at the edge. Without a care, we're on the brink. Gotta taste it, so sweet. Sipping in your ecstasy. Yes. On the edge, won't the world stop turning? Thinking fast, but I can't help falling. Feel we're on the verge of it, free falling on the precipice. Stand staring at the edge. Without a care, we're on the brink. Gotta taste it, so sweet. Sipping in your ecstasy. Yes.
Okay, so that feels better. I've made some adjustments. I've brought the S's down manually as well as cranked the de-esser a touch more. What I'm finding is as much as I like the 10K boost, the air, it's also bringing out sibilance. So if I bring it up to 20K and I crank that up a little more, we get a lot of that brilliance and brightness and the feeling that this is an expensive vocal without sacrificing a ton of sibilance poking out at us, which is great. I don't have to try and fix that problem and just choose, okay, I'm just choosing to boost 10K and then I'm going to try and add soothe and maybe another de-esser and all of that stuff. If I can remove that problem and make another decision that still retains what I'm going for and allows me to retain the natural performance, I will try and do that as best I can. So once more for luck, let's have a listen before and after.
On the edge, won't the world stop turning? Thinking fast, but I can't help falling. Feel we're on the verge of it, free falling on the precipice. Stand staring at the edge. Without a care, we're on the brink. Gotta taste it, so sweet. Sipping in your ecstasy. Yes.
And after.
On the edge, won't the world stop turning? Thinking fast, but I can't help falling. Feel we're on the verge of it, free falling on the precipice. Stand staring at the edge. Without a care, we're on the brink. Gotta taste it, so sweet. Sipping in your ecstasy. Yes.
Okay, so it sounds a lot more present. There's some parts of the vocal that I enjoy that are being accentuated, some of that 2.5K, some of that top end. We're getting rid of some build up, a little bit of build up at 700, some of the low mids, accentuating around 3K, attenuating some of that sibilance, adding a little bit of that 650, and then a ton of air. So we've used 2 EQ plugins and 1 dynamic tonal plugin. to get this result. And we've not done anything crazy. We've done a few little moves. And if you notice how I've approached this, I've looked at problem areas and then enhancements. So what are the problems? The problems were some build up here. And what were the enhancements? We wanted to just enhance a little bit of this area, a little bit of that area, and a little bit of this area. And that's it. I don't feel like I need to do anything else. I'm going to move on at this stage to the next part of my processing. And then I would come back, listen to a reference, listen to a few references, take a break, come back again, and then listen. Where are we in the ballpark? Are we there? Are there any tweaks we need to make? How is it feeling tonally? How does the artist feel about it? Do they like how it sounds? And then move on. Compression. What is compression? Compression is an audio processing technique used to reduce the dynamic range of an audio signal by attenuating the amplitude of louder sounds while leaving the softer sounds relatively unaffected. In simple terms, compression evens out the volume levels of an audio signal by reducing the difference between the loudest and quietest parts. This is achieved using a compressor device or plugin, which automatically reduces the gain, volume, or the audio signal when it exceeds a certain threshold level. Compression is commonly used in music production, broadcasting, and sound reinforcement to control dynamics, improve intelligibility, and increase perceived loudness. How does it relate to vocal production? Compression plays a crucial role in vocal production for several reasons. 1. Leveling dynamics. Vocals can have a wide dynamic range, with some parts being very loud and others very quiet. Compression helps to even out these differences by reducing the volume of the loudest parts, making the overall performance more consistent and easier to mix. 2. Improving intelligibility. Compression can bring quieter vocal details such as whispers or softer phrases up in volume, making them easier to hear without increasing the overall level of the vocal. This improves the clarity and intelligibility of the vocal performance, especially in busy mixes. 3. Controlling peaks. Vocals often have sudden spikes in volume, such as when a singer hits a high note or emphasizes a word. Compression helps to tame these peaks, preventing them from clipping or distorting and ensuring a smooth, controlled vocal performance. 4. Enhancing presence. By reducing the dynamic range of the vocal signal, compression can make the vocal sound more upfront and present in the mix. This allows the vocal to cut through other instruments and stand out without being overpowering. 5. Increased perceived loudness. Compression can make vocals sound louder and more prominent in the mix without actually increasing their peak volume. By reducing the dynamic range, compression allows engineers to push the overall level of the vocals closer to the maximum without causing distortion or discomfort for the listener. Overall, compression is a powerful tool in music production that helps to shape the dynamics, clarity, presence, and overall impact of the vocal performance within the context of the mix. Most common compression types used on vocals. The most common types of compression used on vocals are 1. Optical compression. Optical compressors use a light-dependent resistor, LDR, to control gain reduction, resulting in a smooth and natural compression response. They're known for their musicality and gentle compression characteristics. Optical compressors are often used on vocals for transparent leveling and subtle dynamic control, particularly in situations where a more natural and musical compression sound is desired. VCA compression. Voltage-controlled amplifier. VCA compressors use voltage-controlled amplifiers to regulate gain reduction, providing fast and precise control over dynamics. They're known for their transparent and versatile compression characteristics, with the ability to deliver both gentle and aggressive compression. VCA compressors are widely used on vocals for general dynamic control, leveling, and shaping the overall tone of the vocal performance. They are subtle for a wide range of vocal styles and genres. FET compression, field effect transistor. FET compressors use field effect transistors to regulate gain reduction, providing a fast attack time and a slightly colored compression sound. They're known for their punchy and aggressive compression characteristics with a distinctive mid-range emphasis. FET compressors are popular on vocals for adding energy, presence, and punch to the vocal performance. They're often used in rock, pop, and hip-hop music where a more aggressive compression sound is desired. Tube compression. Tube compressors use vacuum tubes to regulate gain reduction. They provide a warm and rich compression sound with subtle harmonic distortion. They're known for their smooth and musical compression characteristics. Tube compressors are used on vocals for adding warmth, color, and character to the vocal performance. They're often favored in genres like jazz, blues, and soul, where a vintage and organic compression sound is desired. Each type of compression has its own sonic characteristics and applications, and the choice of compressor depends on the desired sound, style, and context of the vocal performance. Alright, so let's walk through some popular compressor types. We're going to cover opto, VCA, FET, and tube, and I'm going to show you some of the plugin variations of these and how they work. So first off, let's check out the opto, optical compressor, the most famous being the LA2A. So let's pull that up. So here we have the LA2A. It's a very simple plugin. There's only a few parameters. The attack and release are built into this under the hood. So all you have here is the gain and feeding that into the plugin itself, and then the peak reduction, which acts as the threshold. You have limit or compress depending on what you want to do with it, and then you just have output, gain, and then the on off. So very simple to use, but let's have a listen to how this sounds on vocals.
On the edge, won't the world stop turning? Thinking fast, but I can't help falling. Feel we're on the verge of it, free falling on the precipice. Stand staring at the edge, without a care, we're on the brink. Gotta taste it, so sweet, sipping in your ecstasy. On the edge, won't the world stop turning? Stop turning, thinking fast, but I can't help falling. Feel we're on the verge of it, free falling on the precipice. Stand staring at the edge.
So we're getting about 3 to minus 5 dB of gain reduction. So let's have a listen to how this sounds on and off.
On the edge, won't the world stop turning? Thinking fast, but I can't help falling. Feel we're on the verge of it, free falling on the precipice. Stand staring at the edge, without a care, we're on the brink. Gotta taste it, so sweet, sipping in your ecstasy. Yes.
And then let's put it on.
On the edge, won't the world stop turning? Thinking fast, but I can't help falling. Feel we're on the verge of it, free falling on the precipice. Stand staring at the edge, without a care, we're on the brink. Gotta taste it, so sweet, sipping in your ecstasy. Yes.
So this feels a lot more upfront because everything's leveled out in a very gentle and transparent way. But what's also really nice about what's happening with this LA2A is it's also affecting the tone. So to my ear, it's adding a little more presence with some mid and high mid tonal characteristics that come with this compressor type. So once more, let's have a quick listen.
On the edge, won't the world stop turning? On the edge, won't the world stop turning? On the edge, won't the world stop turning? On the edge, won't the world stop turning?
So everything feels a lot more leveled out, but it doesn't sound super compressed, which is really, really nice with this particular plugin. This is kind of what we talk about when we say quote unquote musical. The compression sounds musical. All right, let's move on to our VCA. So we've got our DBX 160 emulation. We've got our threshold. We've got our ratio, our output, power on off, and then our mix knob, and then some metering. So let's just start dialing this in.
On the edge, won't the world stop turning? Thinking fast, but I can't help falling. Feel we're on the verge of it, free falling on the precipice. Stand staring at the edge, without a care, we're on the brink. We gotta taste it, so sweet. Sipping in your ecstasy. Gotta taste it, so sweet. Sipping in your ecstasy, yes.
Okay, so there's a very different tonal characteristic that comes with this, and it sounds a little more aggressive, a little more upfront compared to the LA2A. And let's kind of try and dial this in to -3, -5 so that we're getting the same amount of gain reduction.
On the edge, won't the world stop turning? Thinking fast, but I can't help falling. Feel we're on the verge of it.
There's a really nice mid, kind of low mid accentuation that's coming with this running through the circuitry that I really like as well. So let's A/B this against our LA2A.
On the edge, won't the world stop turning? Thinking fast, but I can't help falling. Feel we're on the verge of it, free falling on the precipice. On the edge, won't the world stop turning? Thinking fast, but I can't help falling. Feel we're on the verge of it, free falling on the precipice.
Let's try and dial that in a touch more.
On the edge, won't the world stop turning? Thinking fast, but I can't help falling. Feel we're on the verge of it, free falling on the precipice.
So I really like the tone that comes with this, but I'm hearing a lot more saturation. I'm hearing a little bit of pumping, and the attack and release is under the hood with this as well. So I would probably mess around with the ratio, make it a little less aggressive.
On the edge, won't the world stop turning? Thinking fast, but I can't help falling. Feel we're on the verge of it, free falling on the precipice.
Once again, let's listen to the LA2A.
On the edge, won't the world stop turning? Thinking fast, but I can't help falling. Feel we're on the verge of it, free falling on the precipice.
So this is a little more transparent to my ears as well. But if you wanted to go for this sound where you have this accentuated mid-range, you've got a little more saturation and coloration, and a little more of an aggressive sound, this is great. And what you can also do is mix that in. We're going to talk about parallel processing later, but you could blend this in with the original signal so that it's a little less aggressive. All right, next we have our FET compression, and we're going to pull up our 1176. So this has a little more going on. We have our input and output. So this is essentially our threshold. How much gain do we want to input into the compressor? And then we have to match the output gain, so we're not just getting more volume and compression. We also want to make sure we're at the same level, we're gain matching, so we're not being tricked by our ears thinking it's better because it's louder. And then we have our attack and our release. So we've got our fast attack this way, and then our slow attack and release that way. And then we have our ratio, 4:1, 8:1, 12:1, 20:1, and then some metering here. So let's start dialing this in. So we're going to start with fast attack, fast release.
On the edge, won't the world stop turning? Thinking fast, but I can't help falling. Feel we're on the verge of it, free falling on the precipice.
Got a medium attack. Let's go all the way slow.
On the edge, won't the world stop turning? Thinking fast, but I can't help falling. Feel we're on the verge of it, free falling on the precipice. Stand staring at the edge, without a care.
let's do a fast-ish attack and fast release.
On the edge, won't the world stop turning? Thinking fast, but I can't help falling. Feel we're on the verge of the free falling on the precipice. Stand staring at the edge without a care. We're on the brink. Gotta taste it, so sweet. Sipping in your ecstasy. Let's break out. On the edge, won't the world stop turning? Thinking fast, but I can't help falling. Feel we're on the verge of it, free falling on the precipice.
So we've got some more mid and low mid information coming with the tone of this compressor. There's a lot more grit as well. It sounds a little punchier.
On the edge, won't the world stop turning? Thinking fast, but I can't help falling. Feel we're on the verge of it, free falling on the precipice.
So I'm letting in a little more of the transient information here. So if I wanted it to be a little more punchy, I'm going to start to bring the attack slower. As it goes slower, more transient information is coming through. As it goes faster, it's hitting all those transient peaks, all that transient information a lot faster. So you're going to have a smoother sound. So think fast attack, smoother, slow attack, punchier. And then with release, a fast release is going to let go of all that information really quickly, which can sometimes cause pumping, but it can be a little more transparent. Whereas if you've got a slower release, it's going to really hold on to all of that. So let's have a fast attack and a slow release. Listen to how that sounds.
On the edge, won't the world stop turning? Thinking fast, but I can't help falling. Feel we're on the verge of it, free falling on the precipice.
So it's a lot thicker, it's a lot smoother. Let's do the opposite.
On the edge, won't the world stop turning? Thinking fast, but I can't help falling. Feel we're on the verge of it, free falling on the precipice.
So this is a lot more up front, it's a lot punchier, it feels a little more transparent as well. You can hear a little less of that compression, especially on the attack. So let's A/B this with our VCA and our Opto. So first off, we've got our 1176, we've got our FET compressor.
On the edge, won't the world stop turning? Thinking fast, but I can't help falling. Feel we're on the verge of it, free falling on the precipice.
Just make sure we're gain matched.
On the edge, won't the world stop?
Okay, let's bring it down.
On the edge, won't the world stop turning? Thinking fast, but I can't help falling. Feel we're on the verge of it, free falling on the precipice.
Okay, so let's listen to our DBX versus the 1176.
On the edge, won't the world stop turning? Thinking fast, but I can't help falling. Feel we're on the verge of it, free falling on the precipice. On the edge, won't the world stop turning? Thinking fast, but I can't help falling. Feel we're on the verge of it, free falling on the precipice.
So this is a little more transparent. There's a little less of that mid-range energy and it's a little less aggressive. This has got a more spitty quality. Let's have a listen to that again, just this section.
On the edge, won't the on the edge, won't the world stop turning? Thinking fast, but I can't help falling.
Listen to fast and falling and stop turning, and then we'll A/B that with the 1176.
On the edge, won't the world stop turning? Thinking fast, but I can't help falling. On the edge, won't the world stop turning? Thinking fast, but I can't help falling. Feel we're on the verge of it, free falling on the precipice.
Now, if we wanted a little more of that spitty quality, we could be a little more aggressive with it.
On the edge, won't the world stop turning? Thinking fast, but I can't help falling. Feel we're on the verge of it, free falling on the precipice. On the edge, won't the world stop turning? Thinking fast, but I can't help falling. Feel we're on.
getting a little more of that transient information on Fear We're Falling. So we can create something similar, but this is going to give you that energy pretty much right off the bat. And of course, as you dial in the ratio, that's going to become even more aggressive and more upfront and more bitey. And we're only on a 3-1. And to try and get something similar, we had to go on an 8 or a 12-1 and dial in the attack and release. So there we have it. Let's go back to where we were.
On the edge, want the world stop turning. Thinking fast, but I can't help falling. Feel we're on the verge of it.
Okay, so let's AB the 1176 with our LA2A.
On the edge, want the world stop turning. On the edge, want the world stop turning. Thinking fast, but I can't help falling. Feel we're on the verge of it. Free falling on the precipice.
LA2A.
On the edge, want the world stop turning. Thinking fast, but I can't help falling. Feel we're on the verge of it. Free falling on the precipice. On the edge, want the world stop turning. Thinking fast, but I can't help falling.
So this is a little more aggressive. I can hear some of the compression on the release compared to this, which is a lot less perceptible. It's a lot more transparent. And what you can do here, which is very, very common, and we'll talk about some of this later, is use compressors in series. So we could use the attack and release parameters here to catch the peaks, like that.
On the edge, want the world stop turning. Thinking fast, but I can't help falling. Feel we're on.
So Fear We're Falling,
On the edge, want the
On the Edge. We're kind of using this as a limiter. We're peak limiting. And then we can use the LA2A to smooth the rest of it out.
On the edge, want the world stop turning. Thinking fast, but I can't help falling. Feel we're on the verge of it. Free falling on the precipice. Stand staring at the edge. Without a care, we're on the brink. Gotta taste it, so sweet. Sipping in your ecstasy. Yes.
So we can work around that as well. Of course, we want to bring the gain up as well a little bit just to match it. We're losing some gain with that gain reduction. And finally, let's talk about tube compressors. So I'm going to use the FG Mu for this. This is by Slate Digital. This is a kind of hybrid of a few different tube compressors, the Fairchild and a couple others. So let's have a listen to how this sounds. We've got our input, we've got our threshold, we've got our makeup gain, we've got our attack and release, we've got our high pass filter. So if we want to get rid of some of the lows here so that that's not triggering the compressor, a lot of low end has more energy and that will get hit by the compressor before the rest of the information if you needed to do that. Let's say, for example, that you wanted to compress a drum group and you don't want to compress the kick. You'd kind of dial that in so that you're missing the low lows of that kick. And then we just have a mix knob so we can dial that in. And we have some stereo mid-side processing. We'll leave that for another day. So let's start dialing this in.
On the edge, want the world stop turning. Thinking fast, but I can't help falling. Feel we're on the verge of it. Free falling on the precipice. Stand staring at the edge. Without a care, we're on the brink. Gotta taste it, so sweet. Sipping in your ecstasy. Let's break. On the edge, want the world stop turning. Thinking fast, but I can't help falling. Feel we're on the verge of it. Free stop turning. Thinking fast, but I can't help falling. Feel we're on the verge of it.
So we're getting a little bit of mid-range. We're accentuating some of that top end. It's adding a little bit of that air to it, which is nice. Let's listen to how this sounds compared to the 1176.
On the edge, won't the world stop turning? Thinking fast, but I can't help falling. Feel we're on the verge of it. Free falling on the precipice. On the edge, won't the world stop turning? Thinking fast, but I can't help falling. Feel we're on the verge of it. Free falling on the precipice. On the edge, won't the world stop turning? Thinking fast, but I can't help falling. Feel we're on the verge of it. Free falling on the precipice. Stand staring at the edge.
Just trying to gain match that a little better.
On the edge, won't the world stop turning? On the edge, won't the world stop turning?
So we can hear a lot more compression here. There's a different tonal characteristic as well.
On the edge, won't the world stop turning? On the edge, won't the world stop turning?
There's a little more high end and high mid information here.
On the edge, won't the world stop turning?
There's a little more mid-range information with the 1176, so it's affecting the tone as well. This sounds a little more compressed to my ears. I can hear it a little more compared to that, and it's just a touch more aggressive. It's just a slightly different sound, and that is kind of similar to the DBX 160. Let's have a listen to these two together.
On the edge, won't the world stop turning? On the edge, won't the world stop turning?
A lot more mid and low mid information. We're getting less of the high end, whereas this,
On the edge, won't the world stop turning?
especially on the S's, that kind of really bright brilliance, we're accentuating that with this compressor, which adds a lot more presence to the vocals. So there you have it. There are a few of the different compressor types and their associated characteristics, and a couple of different plugins to show you how these all fit into the different compressor types. So just quickly, for Logic users, you have all of these really nicely put together with the stock Logic compressor, which is so awesome. So we've got a digital, and then we've got our VCA, we've got our FET, we've got our vintage VCA, our classic VCA, our vintage FET, and our vintage Opto. So we've got a kind of LA2A here, we've got our DBX 160 kind of vibe, we've got our 1176, and these are all just built in here. So you do not need to go and buy all of these plugins. You've got everything here ready for you. Most important parameters. When using compression on vocals, it's essential to understand the following parameters. 1. Threshold. The threshold determines the level at which compression begins to take effect. Any signal that exceeds the threshold will be subject to compression. Setting the threshold appropriately is crucial for controlling how much compression is applied to the vocals. Lowering the threshold will result in more compression, while raising it will reduce the amount of compression applied. 2. Ratio. The ratio determines the amount of gain reduction applied to the signal once it exceeds the threshold. For example, a ratio of 4:1 means that for every 4 decibels the signal exceeds the threshold, only 1 decibel will pass through the compressor. Adjusting the ratio allows you to control the intensity of compression. Higher ratios result in more aggressive compression, while lower ratios provide gentler compression. 3. Attack. The attack time determines how quickly the compressor responds to signals that exceed the threshold. A fast attack time means the compressor reacts quickly to loud sounds, while a slower attack time allows transient peaks to pass through before compression kicks in. Setting the attack time appropriately is crucial for shaping the transient response and preserving the natural dynamics of the vocal. Fast attack times contain peaks and provide more consistent level control, while slower attack times can retain the punch and detail of the initial transients. Release. The release time determines how quickly the compressor returns to normal gain after the input signal falls below the threshold. A shorter release time means the compressor recovers more quickly, while a longer release time allows for a smoother and more transparent compression effect. Adjusting the release time helps to shape the envelope of the compressed signal and control the overall dynamic response. Shorter release times are more suitable for maintaining tight control and preventing pumping artifacts, while longer release times can enhance sustain and add warmth to vocals. 5. Makeup gain. The makeup gain control allows you to compensate for any volume reduction caused by compression. It boosts the level of the compressed signal to match the original input level or desired output level. Adjusting the gain makeup ensures that the overall level of the compressed vocal remains consistent with the rest of the mix. It allows you to achieve the desired balance between compression and overall volume without sacrificing clarity or dynamics. Understanding and properly adjusting these parameters allows you to effectively control the dynamics, tone, and overall impact of the compressed vocals in your mix. Okay, so we have touched on this already, but I wanted to go in a little more depth with the parameters of compression. So let's talk about everything on here. So we've got threshold, which is at which point do you want the compression to kick in. You've got your ratio, which I think of as how powerful the compression is. If you're getting in your head about the numbers, I just like to think of it as if you're in a room with one person and you're against one person, you have to fight them. You know, you've got more of a chance of holding your own, and maybe even against two people. When you go to 3, 4, 5, 8, 12, 20, 30, there's pretty much no chance you're going to win unless you're a ninja. But this is kind of how I like to think of it, and that's how I kind of learnt compression in terms of ratio. Makeup gain, making up the gain that's being lost with the gain reduction that's happening. Pro tip, just make sure auto gain is off, as it tends to add more gain than is necessary. Then we've got attack release. You can auto release if you want. And we've got fast attack, slow attack, fast release, slow release. We've got our input gain, our output gain, and knee, which is the transition between the compressed and non-compressed signals. So you can have a hard knee or a soft knee, and it's just telling the compressor how to react. And you can see that. So we've got a hard knee, soft knee. It's a lot more angular, a lot softer, and you can play around with how you want that to be. Oftentimes, I don't play around too much with knee, and there are a lot of compressors that don't have this option. So let's just start compressing our vocal.
On the edge, won't the world stop turning?
So nothing's happening now, so I need to dial the threshold in, and you can see this little graphic here that is showing how the threshold is working under the hood. And then if we dial that knee in, you can see it's a lot less soft. So let's start compressing.
On the edge, won't the world stop turning? Thinking fast, but I can't help falling. Feel we're on.
So you can see we're getting about 5 dB of gain reduction.
On the edge, won't the world stop turning? Thinking fast, but I can't help falling. Feel we're on the verge of it. Free.
10 dB. This is a very fast attack.
Then staring at the edge, without a care, we're on the brink. Gotta taste it, so sweet. Sipping in your ecstasy. Let's
mute those backing vocals for now.
on the edge, won't the world stop turning? Thinking fast, but I can't help.
So this is a really aggressive compression setting. Let's listen to the knee.
On the edge, won't the world stop turning? Thinking fast, but I can't help falling. Feel we're on.
So with a hard knee, it's a little choppier when the compression kicks in, and it's creating that compressed artifact that we might not really want if we want something sounding transparent. Whereas a softer knee, it flows a little more evenly between the compressed and uncompressed signal.
On the edge, won't the world stop turning? Thinking fast, but I can't help falling. Feel we're on the verge of it, free falling on the precipice.
And then as the ratio gets higher and higher, we can hear that compression clamping in a lot more. It's a lot stronger, it's a lot more forceful.
On the edge, won't the world stop turning? Thinking fast, but I can't help falling. Feel we're on the verge of it, free falling on the precipice. Stand staring at the edge, without a care, we're on the brink. Gotta taste it, so sweet, sipping in your ecstasy. Let's.
So we've got this smooth feeling that we spoke about earlier with a fast attack and a slow release. We can do a slow attack and a fast release, get something a little more punchy.
On the edge, won't the world stop turning? Thinking fast, but I can't help falling. Feel we're on the verge of it, free falling on the precipice. Stand staring at the edge, without a care, we're on the brink. Gotta taste it.
And properly adjusting these parameters allows you to effectively control the dynamics, tone, and overall impact of the compressed vocals in your mix. Okay, so we have touched on this already, but I wanted to go in a little more depth with the parameters of compression. So let's talk about everything on here. So we've got threshold, which is at which point do you want the compression to kick in. You've got your ratio, which I think of as how powerful the compression is. If you're getting in your head about the numbers, I just like to think of it as if you're in a room with one person and you're